In 2024, we saw a lot of popular manga come to an end to a very mixed reception, but an outlier to all of this is Oshi No Ko, a series that had an ending so terrible that had people going as far as to burning the volumes that they bought. And even though all this is doing is wasting good paper, the outcry for the series and its conclusion was unlike anything the anime community has seen before. But if you take a look at the public's opinion of Oshi No Ko only a couple years prior, you would see people saying the complete opposite. People absolutely loved the series, and it was highly regarded as one of the best running anime and manga in this day of age. So, what exactly happened? How did Oshi No Ko go from making headlines and breaking records to one of the most despised animes in our current generation? Oshi No Ko was one of my favorite animes at one point, and now I'm almost ashamed to admit that I was a fan of it. And now that it's been a couple months since it's ended, I wanted to find out what made it so great in the first place, because yes, it was actually good at one point. How did it fall so badly? And what was the reason for it? So join me in this, extremely long video to find out the rise and fall of Oshi No Ko and the truth behind what really happened. Jesus Christ, that is a very long video. How did I do that? Something that's sort of universal when it comes to a lot of anime is struggling to have an engaging beginning. Captivating an audience immediately is quite hard for authors, since a lot of the time they don't quite know what they want the series to be. Gintama is probably the best example of this. Even though it has a very interesting premise, the beginning portion is so slow and sluggish to get through, and it doesn't really become a fun series to watch until you get past the first 50 episodes or so. And yes, this series eventually went on to become very good, but there's gonna be a lot of people out there who aren't willing to invest that much time to see the true quality of Gintama and other series that follow suit. However, Oshi No Ko has never really had that problem, and I'd go as far as to say it has one of the greatest introductions I've ever seen, and it's a big reason as to why it became so popular from the get-go. And it does so by hooking the audience as early as the first words uttered in the manga. What if you were born as a celebrity's child? An intriguing yet realistic thought that's probably come across you and I's mind at some point in time. aka what if you were born as a nepo baby. And from that opening remark, along with what proceeds after, it immediately sets the tone that the series is trying to go for. Being introduced to the character of Goro, a 30-year-old doctor with an almost cartoonish obsession of an idol named Ai, and then meeting Ai herself and finding out about how ditzy and bubbly she is in only a few panels, gives us a good feel for the characters and also brings a very comedic vibe to the series, which is something Akasaka usually excels at if you've ever seen his previous work. But where Oshi No Ko starts to differ is where it introduces some of the more darker and tragic elements, since we learn that the reason that Goro has such a big obsession with Ai in the first place is because of his patient, a young girl who is a huge fan of Ai and wanted to become an idol like her, but due to her unfortunate conditions, she passed away at a young age, and so he becomes a fan of Ai as well to keep that memory of her alive. Not to mention that Ai herself, despite being 16, is pregnant with an unknown father, which we can already tell what the implications of that are. These are some very heavy subjects clouded by the wholesome and comedic front the manga tries to give off, but despite this, the chapter is still pretty light. Everything regarding Ai is pretty wholesome, and seeing Goro try his best to make sure the procedure goes right, even though he still has mixed feelings on Ai's situation. Oh, never mind, he gets pushed off a cliff. This was definitely the big oh shit moment that fully captivated the audience. The moment that takes everything the first chapter built up and completely turns it on its head. Take something like the first episode of Attack on Titan, and how you have the wall that was built up to be sturdy as hell and will never be brought down, only for said wall that was sturdy as hell to be destroyed. But Oshi No Ko does something really interesting where it doesn't just have one, but two oh shit moments in the first chapter, where after Goro dies, he gets reincarnated as a child of Ai, which in of itself is very strange, but brings back the lines that were were first uttered in the chapter, bringing it all full circle. In one chapter alone, Akasaka already knows what he wants the story to be, and does an amazing job of setting the story and the characters. And with an ending like that, it would be hard for anyone not to be interested in what's gonna proceed next. After quite an eventful first chapter, Oshi No Ko follows up with chapters that are pretty laid back, all things considered. I mean, compared to murder and reincarnation and all. But do a great job of world building and introducing the rest of the main cast. The main character, Aqua, aka dude who died and got reincarnated as a baby, acts as a good vessel for the audience to learn everything about idols, the show business, and entertainment in general. Because even though he retains all of his memories from his past life, he's pretty unaware of what it actually feels like to work in the industry. So the fact that he's currently an infant physically and in a metaphorical sense is the type of thing that makes me go, haha, Akasaka, how smart of you. Yeah, that's it. While we're here, let me quickly address the Oshi No Ko is too weird allegations that people brought up when this series first started. The concept of a 30-year-old that's obsessed with the teen idol being reincarnated as his favorite idol's son is inherently a strange concept, and in the hands of a lesser writer, could lead to some very weird things that could immediately turn off me and a bunch of other people to continue reading. But early on, the boundaries are clearly set. There's a distinct line which is never crossed over, so the audience knows that nothing really weird will happen in the series. Along with Aqua, we're introduced to his twin sister Ruby, who is the reincarnation of Serena, Ichigo, Ai's manager, Miyako, who's basically Aqua and Ruby's babysitter, and finally Ai herself. These characters make up the ensemble cast and represent different aspects of the entertainment industry, and the first couple of chapters gives us a glimpse of what it's like to be in this business, and how dazzling and exciting it could be to watch your favorite celebrity do what they love and experiencing that from a closer point of view. But more importantly, the prologue arc gives us a good glimpse at one of Oshi No Ko's greatest strengths. It's realism. At this point, Ai is not that big of an idol. Even though she has a cute face and gives it her all when she performs, she barely gets any money. Which was odd for me personally, given how I thought idols and singers were essentially the same thing, but throughout reading this series, it turns out that I couldn't be more wrong. And in fact, idols are actually treated very poorly, which at times can feel a little bit depressing to read, but adds so much more to how Akasaka portrays the entertainment industry. Because yeah, it's an awful place, and this series doesn't hold anything back in that regard. But despite everything I just said, this prologue is still mostly lighthearted, all things considered. Aqua and Ruby are very cute to watch, as they have some great banter between each other, and witnessing the three of them act as a wholesome family is quite sweet to watch, as if they're in a slice of life comedy together, made all the more better considering who they were in their past lives, especially in Ruby's case, since she was bedridden her entire life before she died, and never got to truly live like she wanted to, and now she realizes she has the opportunity to realize her dream of becoming an idol. It's such a sweet moment that I can't help but smile to every time I reread it. As we skip ahead to chapter 8, Ai has become one of the most popular idols in Japan, to the point where her group is going to perform in the Tokyo Dome, so work is doing better than ever, and Ai's kids are slowly finding themselves getting into the entertainment world. Everything is going super well for everyone. Okay, we all know it's too good to be true. One second. Ah, there it is. So Ai Hoshino gets stabbed in the comfort of her own home right before the biggest performance of her life. And yeah, it was kind of obvious that something like this was going to happen sooner rather than later. We know at this point that the series holds nothing back in terms of being dark. So her death flag was literally waving right in front of her the moment she first appeared. But that doesn't make her death any less tragic, and I'd argue even makes it more depressing. Even though she was only around for less than 10 chapters, we became really invested in her character and what she means for everyone around her. She was picked off and orphanaged and thrown into the world of entertainment despite having no experience in it previously, and on top of that, she has to raise 2 kids, even though she herself has never had a mother figure. But despite her circumstances, she never once complains about how hard she has it. it, and instead turns it into motivation to becoming a better mom, becoming a better idol, and becoming a better person, because she knows she has people who are relying on her. And in her dying moments, she spent it only thinking about apologizing to everyone she thought she disappointed, before uttering her final words to her kids, as we watch the eyes that once shone so brightly vanish alongside Ai herself. The influence that her character had was incredible. She was literally only alive for less than 6% of the entire series, but she left such a big impact in the story and outside of it as well, being a huge fan favorite within the community. I mean, hell, I liked Ai so much that I debated buying her idol outfit just for this video. Nah, I can't defile myself like this. I mean, it's way too expensive. Next chapter plays out how do you expect. The rest of Japan finds out about Ai's death, and obviously everyone's heartbroken. And as the viewer, you find yourself asking the question, what happens now? Will the rest of the story just be about Aqua and Ruby fulfilling their mom's wishes of furthering themselves in the entertainment industry? That could make for some interesting stuff, but it needs more. Something that fits in line for what the first 10 chapters represented, which is when Oshi No Ko introduces its third and final oh shit moment of the series. When Aqua realizes there had to be someone out there who knew that Ai had children and where she lived. Because even though the murderer has already been identified, there had to have been someone who fed him that information. And who else would know that Ai had children other than the person who impregnated her? And assuming that their father is also in the show business, Aqua now has a goal. Make his way through the entertainment industry, collecting DNA samples of people he worked with to find out who exactly left for milk all those years ago and get his revenge. Does it feel a little edgy? In a way, yes, but the motivation is logical and makes for an amazing mystery that has the viewer on the edge of their seat. A great conclusion to the first story arc and sets up what's to come beautifully. And in my opinion, this is as close to a perfect prologue as you can get. There is very little in terms of flaws that aren't just nitpicks, and it makes sense as why Oshi No Ko captivated such a large audience right from the get-go. And also because the anime somehow makes it even better. The greatest thing this series could have done is made everything I just talked about into a feature-length movie film. Detailing the first 10 chapters in an hour-and-a-half pilot makes the experience infinitely better, even though the source material was already pretty amazing to begin with. With one episode alone, Oshi No Ko swept the charts, becoming one of the most watched pilots of any anime, and even snatching first place in my anime list top-rated anime with only one episode. Until the Full Alchemist fans review bombed it. But this was it! This series had set such a high bar, but knowing Akasaka's skills as a writer, we can only hope that the rest of the series can follow suit. So after one of the most crazy cliffhangers we've ever seen, Oshi No Ko decides to deviate from the whole murdered dad plot thing and focus on something else entirely. Which is a good thing, don't get me wrong. Instead, Akasaka uses the murder-kill dad plot as a way for the story to move forward, but also works as a good way to show different sides of the entertainment industry. With something so big that consists of many different avenues in terms of entertainment, there has to be a good reason for our main characters to put themselves into these positions without it feeling pointless or padding out time, while also furthering Aqua's overarching goal in the background, which, speaking of, is now a lot older than he was before. There's been a decent time skip since the previous arc, and the Hoshino twins are now 16 and are about to start their first year at high school. Ruby mostly maintained her very innocent personality from before and is now gunning it to become an idol, while Aqua developed a much more cold personality, not really caring about what goes on in his own life and is still laser focused on his revenge quest to find his father. And he also has a really awful haircut. Like, sometimes given the right angle, it can maybe look cool, but like, come on, dude. You can put a little bit more effort into not having the same hair as 2010 Anthony from Smosh. Anyways, the first arc of the three has Aqua star in a live-action adaptation of a manga called Sweet Today, alongside a character he's met in his past, Kana. aka the best character in the entire show. She was one of the characters that were introduced earlier on as a child actor prodigy, and that fact contributes to what makes her a fascinating character now, because Kana represents a very depressing side to the reality of a lot of child actors, and that is, once they grow up, no one wants anything to do with them anymore. Because of how rare it is to actually find a good child actor, she was held in such a high regard. However, as she got older, people were never able to look past who she was becoming from who she was from before. So slowly, she started to get a lot less work and being known as a has-been. Now starring in Sweet Today, which is a live action of a fairly popular manga, but it's a live action adaptation, which, you know, usually sucks ass. But the way the series handles it here feels so much more scummy. Watching the directors actively know that the show sucks ass, and in this case is only made in the first place as a marketing ploy for the models who star in it. Like, we see this guy named Melt who is so full of himself and so bad at acting that he can feel the cringe coming off the pages. And the thing is, Kana knows that the show is awful and knows her skills are worth way more than this, but does her best anyway to somehow make it the best it can be. And that kind of resilience is what makes Kana such a sympathetic character and one that you want to root for, especially since this is something that a lot of former child actors are going through in real life. Ooh, okay, let's just skip over that. But Kana never gave up though. She kept moving forward in an industry that already left her behind. And as an audience, we really hope that her efforts will eventually be paid off. Knowing all this, you might expect that this arc would have some grand finale that revitalizes her career, but it doesn't. Even though the grand finale was received pretty well due to Aqua and Kana's efforts, the show doesn't become some massive hit. The fans of the source material appreciate it for what it's worth, but the show as a whole still flopped, which sucks, but only contributes to how realistic Oshi No Ko's entertainment world is similar to ours. And nowhere else is that shown off better than in the next arc, the reality dating TV show. After the events of Sweet Today, Aqua is invited to a teen dating show in hopes of again finding out more information on Ai. The arc plays out as any typical reality dating TV show would. I've watched my fair share of dating TV shows, and I gotta admit that this is very— okay, yeah, fuck off. I've watched Love Island before, okay? I know it's considered like trash TV or whatever, but like, it's a lot of fun when you watch it with your friends. And sometimes when you're really lonely. But don't knock it until you try it. We're introduced to an assortment of characters, the guys and girls pair up, drama ensues for those in the spotlight, etc. or whatever. However, in a lot of reality TV shows, you'll have characters who don't really contribute much being delegated to the background, which is when we're introduced to Akane, who's someone who wants to stand out on My Love, but fails due to her lack of experience of being on reality TV shows. However, she doesn't let that get to her. She's constantly asking for advice and practicing a lot, like any actor would, to make her stand out so she isn't just a background character. And eventually, she gets her chance to actually do something on the show, which ends up in her accidentally causing a cut on Yuki's face, which is like, not that big of a deal. Everyone knows that she didn't mean to do that, and as a reader, you know that Akane was just trying her best to put herself out there, and in the moment, it isn't treated as a big thing. But the people online, though, think otherwise. This is where the arc really begins, and chapter 25 hammers in how bad something can look when you're taking it at face value. There's just an endless amount of people hating on Akane for what she did to Yuki, from misinformation, doxing, and even death threats. And it's depressing watching Akane react to all this, because we know how kind and how much of a hard worker she is, but since she was such a nobody and hurt someone who is a fan favorite on the show, she got so much more shit for it. And all of this took a toll on her mental health to the point where she tried to take her own life, which thankfully she saved at the last second by Aqua, but doesn't take away from how cruel this chapter was at showing what online criticism can do to someone. And as someone who also tries to entertain people online, I know exactly how this feels. Like, there was this one time where someone in my comment section called me an iPad kid. So clearly you've both been through some extremely traumatic things, but on a more serious note, it gets to the point where you question how realistic this is. Because yeah, people online can be bad, but does it really go to this extent? And it's only when you read more into these kind of situations that you realize that, yeah, it does get this bad. I won't go too much into it here, but if you try to read into controversies that have happened on some reality TV shows, you'd find some stories that are eerily similar to what happened in this arc. This is one of the many examples that show how cruel the entertainment world can be, which at times can feel pretty dark for a series that is supposedly for young teens, but is such a good representation of it and is by far one of the best things about the series. The entertainment industry isn't black and white. A lot more goes on behind the scenes that paint a picture that might be a lot worse or better than what is shown off to the public. And I really respect Akasaka shedding more of a light on these kind of things, which makes the overall product of Oshi No Ko much better than just some typical idol anime. Thankfully, with the help of Aqua and the rest of the cast, they're able to clear Akane's name, and she was even able to redeem herself on the show, where she's able to become Aqua's love interest and eventual sort of girlfriend, which I'll talk about more in just a bit. But this revelation kickstarts the final arc of the three, the first concert. So throughout the past two arcs, while Aqua is doing his thing on Sweet Today and My Love, Ruby was slowly forming her idol group, now being joined by Kana, and a character that was introduced in the reality TV show arc being Memcho. And a part of me was worried at the beginning of the arc that we might rehash some of the things that we already dealt with in the prologue, but as always, Akasaka is able to keep things unique. And in this arc specifically, we see how exactly being an idol brings out Kana's biggest insecurities. She's originally chosen to be the lead girl in the group because of her superior singing and dancing skills, but Kana constantly shoots the idea down because she herself doesn't feel like she's good enough and will cause the group to fail. This is when we get an even bigger glimpse into Kana's backstory, and we see that after her acting career started to go downhill, she tried other paths to see if they'd work, only for that to blow up in her face as well. She's worked so damn hard in every aspect of entertainment just for it to never work out, and so you aren't surprised that she starts feeling this way because she knows what that failure feels like and doesn't want to experience that type of thing again. Especially now in her mind, she might bring down Ruby and Memcho with her. This is the part where Kana goes from a great character to an amazing character, and that's mostly due to my own opinions and how I relate to what she's going through. Like, you might think I'm just some random YouTuber, but every time I script out, edit, and put out a video, there's this constant thought at the back of my mind telling me I'm not good enough, and everything I make is destined to fail. And even though there's people out there who recognize your talent and are excited to watch your videos, you can't help but feel like you're disappointing everyone. And that's why having a character like Kana feels so refreshing to see. Someone who struggles with that kind of anxiety, but still tries her best to persevere to make her lifelong dreams a reality. She just wants to be rewarded for all her hard work, hoping someone, anyone, to tell her that she's doing a good job, that's okay for her to be here, that she's not disappointing anyone. And right when she's about to give up, this scene is not only the best scene in the entire series, but fuck it, it's one of my all-time favorite scenes in any sort of media I've ever watched or read. Aqua holding up his long white rod for a girl embodies what made the past three arcs and the series in general so damn good. And it is the fact that Oshi No Ko has heart. And that heart is in the form of Aqua. So let's take a step back for a second and talk about him, because he's the string that holds everything together. So Aqua, at a surface level, seems like your plain old know-it-all serious smart guy MC. He's always one step ahead and able to plan out his next move and execute it flawlessly because, he's so smart. Wow. And I absolutely hated this at first, because these types of main characters are boring as hell. Kind Kinda like Joker from Persona 5. God, what a boring and awful main character. But as the chapters go on, we start to see that Aqua is more than he seems like on the surface. Not only because we get to see a couple more character quirks that makes him a lot more relatable, but also because of his selfless acts. In Sweet Today, he literally got what he came for before filming a scene, but still decided to save the show and help Kana shine. Not only did he save Akane's life, but he's the one who came up with the idea of healing her reputation by editing a video that paints Akane in a better picture and posting it on social media. He contributed so much more than everyone else when his original plan for the show was getting information about Ai and blending in with the background. Not to mention how he was the catalyst for Bikamochi being formed in the first place, asking Kana to join because he believed she would make a good idol, and asking Memcho to join so she can realize her lifelong dream despite thinking she's too old to be an idol. Which, by the way, Memcho's like 25. And also a dude. Shows how much Aqua actually does care. Despite being described as a selfish and stone cold person, his actions do not reflect that notion at all, which is never shown off better than in here. So for the majority of the first concert arc, Kana is very pissed at Aqua for being in a relationship with Akane, while all the while dealing with her own insecurities. Aqua knew that she was going through something, but couldn't help her because she was giving him the cold shoulder. So he decided to go undercover as Peon and coach Bikamochi while wearing this stupid awesome bird mask, and also comfort Kana during their preparation process, which shows outright how much he cares for the people around him. There is an argument, albeit a very bad one, that the reason why Aqua helped Sweet Today or Akane before was because it was in his best interest. Doing these things will give him valuable resources to eventually help him in his revenge murder dad plan. But here, there was nothing to gain from this, and really only embarrassed him more. He could have just not cared and continued doing his own thing, but he didn't. He went out of his way to give Bikamochi and Kana the confidence they needed to perform on stage, which brings us all the way back to this scene, giving Kana one final push, raising her glow stick color. And then doing this really funny glow stick dance that I still don't really understand because I don't watch that much idol stuff. But it makes for such an impeccable scene! Kana reciprocates Aqua's push and finally gives it her all, giving us the best page spread in the series. And there's a couple of ways to interpret what she says here. The most obvious one is Kana just saying, "I'll make you fall in love with me." But after rereading it, I see a different message from these two panels, and it's how it represents Oshi No Ko as a whole. In that, even though the entertainment industry is filled with vile and evil stuff that makes you question why do you want to be a part of it, there's these shining moments of bliss that trump every and all bad things that the industry is known for. That is what Oshi No Ko is all about, just like this scene. Which is why Kana says, "I'm gonna be your star," which just so happens to translate to Oshi No Ko. Boom! Akasaka, you're a writing genius! That essentially ends off the first concert arc and the beginning portion as a whole, and in my opinion, it builds off what was previously established so goddamn well. I've seen people complain about how Oshi No Ko sort of ditches the overarching plot, but I disagree. This time was well spent introducing the other main characters, expanding on Aqua, and slowly building up the evil dad murder plot in the background. At this point, the show only gets better and better, with the last 3 arcs having a steady increase in quality and introducing my Go Peon. So it would be pretty hard, but understandable, if the next arc doesn't live up to how good these ones were. Holy shit, never mind, this is the best arc in the series. The 2.5D play, or Tokyo Blade, is considered amongst most of the fanbase to be the best arc in the series, and that is for a very good reason. It just feels like everything we've watched up until this point was in preparation for this, and it's about an arc that has to do with stage plays no less. Like, who the fuck cares about stage plays? God damn! Tokyo Blade is by far the biggest arc in terms of scope, revolving around many characters, new and old, and also having many moves moving parts at once. Everyone contributes something to this arc, and it never feels too bloated or drawn out, which is such a difficult task that even longer arcs in other series fail to do. But it isn't apparent here. Every character matters. Except for one, but we'll talk about her later. So the arc starts off with a pretty similar formula that we've kind of been used to seeing by now. Aqua gets an acting opportunity, we learn what kind of production it is and what role he plays, and then we see the behind the scenes work of what exactly happens in a stage play. And then conflict ensues. But here, the conflict itself isn't particularly something that goes on set, but due to disapproval from the creator of the source material, Abiko. Once she gets a look at the stage play, she hates it and wants to start from scratch and write the entire thing herself. And at first she comes off as very stingy and a bit of an asshole at how much she trashes the play and criticizes the screenwriter for butchering her manga. But also, it's hard not to blame her for two big reasons. First off, we see what happens in the series itself when a beloved manga gets a soulless adaptation with Sweet Today. And we've seen this in real life, because again, live action adaptations suck. Netflix? So having the author create something that they've watched grow up and flourish from their hands for years on end, and seeing some random company take what they created and ruin it is heartbreaking. Which leads into my second point. Being a mangaka is like really fucking awful. Like, sure, you get to write something you love, but we are all well aware by now that drawing a chapter of a series weekly is mentally draining, to the point where your average mangaka gets like 3 to 4 hours of sleep every day. So you need to be deeply passionate about your series if you're willing to sacrifice your well-being for it. And Oshi No Ko does a great job of actually showing us how hard it is for them, and why Abiko lashed out the way she did. But it also goes the other way for the people who are a part of the stage play itself, and the constant struggles they go through in order to make sure everything is a success. To the point where even this guy said he would go as far as to suck 2 old men dicks to make sure the play is a success. I know I've already said that this is the best panel in the series, but that's a lie, it's actually this one. There's a lot of praise that can be thrown around for how well Akasaka portrays both sides of the situation in a realistic but entertaining way, ending with the screenwriter and Abiko compromising and working on the adaptation together, which from what we've seen from real life experience is obviously the best way to go about bringing a series to life. But all this amazing insight on stage plays or whatever isn't even half the reason why Tokyo Blade is the best arc, because it does absolute wonders for developing the cast, specifically Aqua. If the 3 previous arcs do a good job of showing that Aqua has a heart, Tokyo Blade does a great job of showing that Aqua is human. After some trouble on set, Aqua is finally brought to his limit as he's struck with a panic attack from the trauma he's experienced in his past, which seemingly comes out of nowhere at first, but when you really think about everything Aqua's been through, you realize that this kind of reaction makes a lot of sense. Even though Aqua is the main character and we've seen his inner thoughts and his actions, it's only now that we get a true understanding as to why he acts the way he does. Because under that stone cold, unwavering personality lies a fragile teenager who just misses his mom. Experiencing her death firsthand affected him a lot more than what we were led to believe originally, and he feels like he has to hold this burden now of having to find her killer, and until then, he can't let himself be happy. And we see this burden embodied by Goro, his past self, which starts to bring up an interesting question. Who is Aqua? In the beginning, he was just a 30-something-year-old doctor who got reincarnated as a baby, but as he got older, he started to become an entity that was different from his previous one. And it's not really concrete as to what he's supposed to be right now, but hopefully it will be expanded upon as we get further into the story. But this doesn't just become an Aqua development arc either. Like I said before, every character, besides one, gets something to do in this arc. Kana and Akane apparently have this long-ass rivalry between each other, and getting to see their interactions and their own philosophies when it comes to acting was amazing. Kana gets over some lingering insecurity issues and lets herself shine at what she's best at. Akane also gives an amazing performance in her own way, but where she really shined in this arc is how exactly she helped Aqua. Because even though they're supposedly dating for business purposes, it's clear how much she cares for him and can see how much trauma he's gone through, and now she just wants to be there for him and see him get better, which is definitely what Aqua needs the most as of right now. But by far the MVP of this arc, that doesn't include the director, that would suck off old people, is my guy Melt. This dude is living proof of how goated Akasaka is at writing characters. He was originally made as a simple plot device, living proof that even if you're a bad actor, it doesn't matter as long as you have a pretty face. We see how much of an asshole he is all the way back in the second arc, and everyone would have been more happy if he never showed up again. But he did. And using that prior knowledge of him, they're able to make Melt an interesting character. Because ever since Sweet Today, he's come to realize how full of himself and bad of an actor he was, and so he wanted to make things right. He started to do acting classes. He did his homework on the character he's playing. He faced all the criticism head on and used it as motivation to do himself justice here. And in the beginning, he still doesn't shine, because even though he has improved, compared to the more seasoned actors, he sticks out like a sore thumb. But he still gives it his all and puts everything he had into one super slick moment with him reenacting a difficult stunt one for what it was in the manga, and proved he can be so much more than just a pretty face if he actually put some effort in, which was such an incredible and triumphant moment to read through, and was done even better in the anime. Melt is a minor character. After this moment, he basically disappears from the series. But that doesn't really matter. The fact that Akasaka took such an expendable character and made us care about him shows how much passion he has for the world he created. Tokyo Blade feels like a culmination of what makes Oshi No Ko so good in the first place, and deserves its flowers for handling so many moving parts without it ever feeling too messy. This is Oshi No Ko at its peak, and it's no surprise that out of the 11 arcs, this is the one that got a stage play adaptation in real life. Which is sort of confusing to think about, because it's essentially a stage play adaptation of a manga that's now getting a stage play adaptation of another stage play, of a manga that is now getting a stage play. Okay, I'm just confusing myself. Let's just move on to... Oftentimes, when a story gets closer towards a climax, there comes to be a point of no return. Some kind of big revelation or significant moment that indicates that from this moment on, nothing will ever be the same again. Think Eren going by himself to invade Marley, or Thorfinn declaring his wish to kill Askeladd. Moments that indicate a change in the status quo, and I believe in the private arc, this is where the point of no return happens. In more ways than one. But first off, we get a gigantic step forward in Aqua's murder dad extravaganza, in which we find out that his dad is actually dead, and we get an exposition dump as to what happened to him. And the thing is, as an audience, we know that this isn't really what happened, and the manga doesn't try to think that we're stupid enough to believe that this is what actually happened, since not even 5 chapters later, Akane realizes a simple loophole that Aqua never considered, and we get a tiny snippet of what his dad looks like. But what makes this an interesting plot twist is how Aqua takes it. Since this was his ultimate goal for his entire life, he couldn't be more surprised to find out that he could never truly get his revenge. But it's almost freeing to him in a way, now knowing he can just live his life however he wants to and not have to be hell-bent on revenge. And as a fan, we sadly know that he's gonna find out the real truth eventually, but for the time being, it's nice, especially knowing how much trauma he has and how he desperately needs therapy, but now he can put all that aside and truly live his life in a healthy way. At least for the time being. But if you thought that the revelation about Aqua's dad was crazy, Akasaka proceeds to give us the actual biggest plot twist in the series. And that's the crazy fact that Ruby, the second main character in the series, actually becomes relevant. Yeah, but seriously, this isn't a joke. Yeah, if there was one major flaw that people often bring up, it's the fact that Ruby has been practically useless up until this point. I mean, it's not like she hasn't done anything. She finally became an idol like she always wanted to. But in the only arc that actually focused on idol stuff, she was completely shafted, and the main focus of the arc was actually on Kana, which, considering what we ended up getting, I'd say was a good trade trade-off. But it does feel good that 70 chapters later, she... Wait, 70 chapters? What the fuck? We're like halfway through the series. How are you so relevant up until this point? Okay, I'm done. That we finally got some much needed screen time from her. So basically, the private arc features Beat Komochi filming a music video for their next big song. And the place they're filming it happens to be in Miyazaki, which coincidentally is also the place where Aqua and Ruby died in their past lives and were reincarnated. And Ruby sees this as an opportunity to go visit Goro at the hospital where she would think he still works at. Which is strange for Ruby to expect Goro would totally understand that a patient he knew 16 years ago came back to life as her favorite idol's daughter, but it fits pretty well for Ruby's innocence and pure personality, along with her other intentions. But we're not talking about that right now. This arc also has a different approach to the whole music video thing. Typically, the entertainment aspect of the arc acts as a crutch for the story to move forward, but here, it's not nearly as prevalent, being used as the way to give us a lot of comedic moments, which is a good change of pace all things considered. So far, the private arc has been filled with lots of laid-back moments for our main cast, so that only makes the big revelation in chapter 77 all the more crazy, when Ruby and Aikane have a run-in with a crow who just so happens to lead them into a little cave within a forest, which there they happen to find the body of Goro. Seeing this scene at the end of this episode does a complete 180 from the mostly wholesome and lighthearted tone the arc had up until this point, and it comes as such a depressing moment for Ruby since Goro has always given her so much hope that she had the potential to realize her dream, and used his words as motivation for her to never give up. So to just see his rotting corpse all these years later is obviously heartbreaking, but then changes Ruby in a way that we've never seen from her before. Ruby slowly puts together that the person who killed Goro and I is her father, and she vows that once she makes her way up the entertainment ladder, she'll get her revenge on the person who took away the people she loved most, just like Aqua did all the way back in chapter 10. This was insane! The contrast between Aqua letting go and Ruby letting revenge consume her is such a cool way to take both of their characters, especially in Ruby's case because now she's actually important, and it adds so much more to her character than just I want to become an idol like Mom was, which she desperately needed, and beautifully brings to an end the first half of the story and opens up the second half. This arc also changed some other aspects to the status quo, with Aqua distancing himself from Kana due to her status as an idol, which felt a little bit out of nowhere, but considering what happened with his mom, you'd know why exactly Aqua would think this would be the best for her. Overall, I think the private arc is still pretty good. It's hard to live up to something as good as Tokyo Blade, but it was definitely needed as an arc to set up what's going to happen in the future. However, this arc was definitely made a lot better with the anime. Not only because it has the advantage of animation, voice acting, etc., but it's because we actually see the end product of the music video. The manga spent all this time building up this music video and we didn't even see it in the end. But in the anime, we get a fully choreographed dance, special effects, and a song that will stay stuck in your head for hours on end. I can't tell you how many times I was working out at the gym with this song blasting through my AirPods. The series began with Goro's death, and the discovery of his body segues us into the second half. In my opinion, I loved almost everything this series has had to offer so far. As someone who aspired at one point to become an actor, I loved getting all this insight of all these different sides of it. So perhaps I might be a little biased in all my praise, but this, coupled with how much development is given to every character, with an overarching plot that is really starting to get underway, Oshi No Ko's hype is at an all-time high with how impeccable the anime adaptation is and the story content that we've had up until this point. And I, and many other fans, were so excited to see what direction the story goes in next. So that's where the anime portion of Oshi No Ko ends, and from this point on, we're going to be covering the manga. And I know all of that was a lot, but trust me, everything I said is going to be completely necessary when talking about Oshi No Ko's downfall. So essentially, this is where the real video begins. Spoilers are kind of obvious, but still had to mention that anyway. Oh god, we're actually going to be doing this, huh? Okay, here we go. The mainstay and scandal arcs are weird. It's not like there's been a huge nosedive in quality after the last arc ended, but there's these tiny things that go a long way to making them feel a little bit more disconnected from what we've gotten previously, and not in a good way. The first clear signs of this are in chapter 81, and we're unloaded with a bunch of information regarding what's been up with the main characters. Aqua has found more success in his acting career. Akane is going to be starring in her own feature-length film production, despite the fact that she's mostly done stage plays, and Bikomochi exploded in popularity. And it just makes me think, whoa, how did all this happen? Like, there was a decent time skip in between the previous arc and this one, but it feels like so much has changed and we're never really given an explanation for it. Like Aqua has previously said, he only acts as a means to find his father, so you would think we would get some sort of development as to why exactly Aqua acts now, but no, it's just kinda glossed over. And as for Akane, I'm happy that she's finally broken out of that theater bubble and has gotten these opportunities, but how did she get them? What kind of connections or deals did she make in order to land this sort of thing when it was explained earlier on that she had trouble finding work that doesn't have to do with theater? But most importantly, seeing the rise of Bikomochi was supposed to be one of the overarching plots of the story, and now they're hitting huge numbers all of a sudden. And we do get a decent explanation as to how exactly Bikomochi blew up, but it was just explained to us. Typically, we'd have multiple chapter arcs on these kind of big developments like in Tokyo Blade or the first concert arc. But here, we're told all these big developments in a monologue by Memcho. And it's hard to say how much of a flaw this is, since we did expect a number of these things to eventually happen, but to just skip over all this feels like we've been cheated on some great plot lines. It would have been cool to see Aqua find different meaning in his life through these acting jobs, or Akane's development to the big screen. Missing out on all this stuff is like the equivalent of seeing Thorfinn begin his redemption arc in episode 26 and then immediately skipping over to the end of the Farmland arc when he's fully completed it. And for a series that was so hell-bent on showing how hard it is to survive in this industry, it just feels so odd that we don't see that happen and everything is going so well for everyone. But moving aside from the time skip, we're now focusing on variety shows and what kind of behind the scenes and controversies that come with that. And it's just fine, I guess. I don't know if it's because variety shows are more of a thing in countries like Korea and Japan, and basically non-existent here, but I'm just not interested in what's happening here at all. I have a vivid memory of watching one back in 2014, because supposedly there was going to be some never-before-seen footage of Oras, and when I was watching it, I was completely dumbfounded of what was happening, but hey, that was 11 years ago. Oshi No Ko made me care about stage plays, so there's gotta be something here for me to be interested in, right? Well, the director-assistant character is pretty fun and easy to root for given his awful circumstances, and Ruby gets a huge spotlight here, having a more active than reactive role and solving the conflict in her own sinister and Aqua-like way. This scene was kinda funny. Yeah, that's about all I got. The conflict that happens here feels like it's been done already in the reality TV show arc, only now the characters feel a lot less compelling because Akasaka didn't do that good of a job building them up. And even though Mainstay finally gives Ruby something to do, I couldn't really pinpoint as to why exactly I felt so much more engaged reading other arcs prior. And I wouldn't be able to find out why exactly that is until I read the next arc, which mainly revolves around Aqua getting back on his revenge path and Kana having the same insecurity issues like she did in chapter 20. Oh God, why are we repeating plot lines? Let's talk about Aqua's de-development real quick. So Aqua catches up with the rest of the audience and finds out his dad is actually still alive, meaning he can get back to his revenge murder fuck you dad plot. Which, okay, we thought this was gonna happen eventually, but it really feels like we didn't see anything out of him trying to better himself or move past his revenge fantasies. And again, this is the lingering issues of the time skip, and the fact that we just skipped all that important stuff. But even now, Akasaka could have made some interesting inner conflict, whether it's worth it to just live for the sake of revenge, or that he feels much more fulfilled now since his life is now his own. But we don't get that. He just has a manic episode, breaks up with his girlfriend, and then says, I have no choice but to go down this road. And like, I understand that this was the overarching plot of the story, but the way Aqua goes back down this path feels very out of place nice and forced. Oh yeah, and that last part, the breaks up with his girlfriend. What the fuck was that? Akane finds out some information on Aqua's dad's identity and plans on doing something about it herself before getting stopped by Aqua, in which we find out that apparently Aqua had a tracking device on her this entire time that we never knew about and came out of nowhere, which seems very out of character for him and makes their talk about finding his dad together pointless because they both had their other plans. It was pretty obvious from before that Aqua was bound to break up with Akane eventually, due to the story seemingly pushing Aqua and Kana a lot more. But the breakup feels so forced with the idea that Aqua was always stalking her location, even though that seems so out of character for him. But maybe that was the point, that Aqua's obsession with revenge was never healthy and needs to be something he overcomes. Given how it's so obvious for the readers, but also how Akane recognizes this and vows to stop his plans so she can quote-unquote save him. So I can sort of excuse how messy this turned out to be if it serves as build-up for later on. But moving past Aqua's extreme needs for therapy, we have Kana. And remember when I said that whole thing about the members of the main cast doing good? Well, Kana is not included in that conversation. She and Aqua are still not on speaking terms, she feels like she's being overshadowed by Ruby in her own idol group, and she isn't finding any acting work, which really confuses me. Story-wise, it makes no sense for her to be struggling with these things. Like the Aqua thing, a little annoying, but understandable. Getting overshadowed by Ruby and saying, "Why did I ever become an idol in the first place?" completely undermines her moment during the first concert arc and makes it feel as though all the development she's done has been for nothing. But that last bit is what really ticks me off. Like, at this point of her career, how is she still having trouble finding work? Before, it made a lot of sense as to why directors didn't want her in films anymore. She was a child actor. When she's no longer a child, less studios would want to use her. But that logic doesn't make sense anymore. She had a bit of a resurgence on the Sweet Today live action, and even though the product sucked, people praised her for the role she played in. She's also technically the main girl in Big Komochi, supposedly one of the biggest idol groups in Japan. She has big name value. And we saw how many acting opportunities I got once her group became big. And we've also seen Akane and Aqua's careers take off after Tokyo Blade, a stage play that did very well, in which Kana also starred in and was considered to be one of the main characters in it. And you're telling me that even with all these factors, she still got the short end of the stick and is having self-esteem issues again? Like, damn, Kana, you're my favorite character, but come on! We learned this lesson 3 separate times already. Get over it! Logically, it just doesn't make sense, and just like with Mainstay, it rehashes plot lines that we've already explored. However, despite the illogical setup, I do like the conflict that's contained in this arc a lot more than Mainstay. Scandal by far has the most unique story compared to every arc that came before it, in that there's no entertainment production that the characters are dealing with, and instead has to do with paparazzi and how they're all heartless bastards. After Kana was caught walking out of a famous director's home at night, which if the public found out about, would ruin hers and Bikomochi's reputation, since Oshi No Ko has already hammered in numerous times already that if the public finds out about an idol's secret relationship, it's Jover for their career. And for Kana to be seen walking out of a famous person's apartment who also happens to be known as a playboy isn't good for her at all. And for all the characters to end up in this situation, it feels most ironic and heavy that it happens to Kana, the character who has constantly lectured Ruby and how important it is to keep her private life clean and thought that Akane should have known better when the My Love drama started, is the one that let her guard down and was involved in a scandal. Which, speaking of, nothing actually happened in the end. Despite the director's advances on her, Kana's love for Aqua stopped her from letting him do anything, and he's completely fine with that. Knowing Oshi No Ko, it could have been so easy to paint this guy as completely irredeemable trash, but he's not. He respected Kana's wishes and still wants to give her roles in movies because he knows she's a talented actor. So hey, look at that, he's not totally bad. But of course, the people in this world don't have the same perspective as the readers do, and once the article comes out, all the information they have is that Kana and him walked into the apartment, and the morning, Kana walked out. Kana is obviously pretty distraught about her career essentially being over when this scandal comes out. But there's a stark difference here compared to all the other times Kana was in a tough situation, because here she doesn't let this get to her, specifically stating that the public can persecute her as much as they want. Nothing can deter her anymore because she knows how strong she is mentally, and most importantly, saying that she no longer wants to be treated as some damsel in distress, and proves once again that she's the best character in the series. So then Aqua saves her once again like she's a damsel in distress. This is weird. Like, I don't mind how this conflict is solved, but it literally goes against everything Kana was trying to say not even 2 chapters ago, and completely takes away all the development Akasaka gave her, because the exact same conflict and resolution happened for the 4th time in a row. So Aqua once again takes someone else's burden and tries to solve it himself when he meets up with the writer who's about to publish Kana's scandal, and he tells him in exchange to not write that article, he will give him an even better story, the truth about his and Ruby's parents. For the entirety of the story, I had a feeling that the truth would have come out eventually, but the question was how? Would it come out by accident from Ruby? Would the father himself come out and tell the public? It was hard to say, but I do think that this was a very well executed way of revealing Ai's secrets. Not only saving Kana's career and reigniting hers and Aqua's friendship, which, woohoo, very happy for them, but also to progress the story forward, causing a rift between Aqua and Ruby's relationship, and a perfect way to set up the movie arc, making for a damn good finale. But that doesn't excuse all the other problems that the scandal and mainstay arcs had. Aqua's breakup and de-development felt forced, Kana's struggles logically didn't make sense, and both arcs as a whole felt redundant and not as engaging as before. And I came to realize the reason for this dip in quality is the lack of heart. The part that I praised the series for endlessly is no longer here. Even now with Aqua's sacrifice, it was in part for his own desires and not selflessly like his actions before. These 2 arcs were not irredeemable by any means, but a lot of what made Oshi No Ko good in the first place was not present. Whether that was on purpose due to the story being a lot darker now, or something that was going on behind the scenes, Oshi No Ko didn't wow us like it did before. And it looks like the fans took notice of this as well, with a lot of them agreeing that after the time skip, Oshi No Ko slowly started to lose its way. But that doesn't mean the hype for the movie arc wasn't there. The arc that's been foreshadowed since chapter 2 and the longest in the series, and with the official character introduction of Aqua and Ruby's dad Hikaru offering some random actor, Jesus Christ, okay, this guy's evil. The interest was there. This is what the story's been building up to, and presumably where all the loose ends will tie up. So let's dive into the movie arc. Wow, never mind, this is awful. The movie arc is so disappointing in so many ways for what's to be the big climax of the series. It falls flat in delivering satisfying arcs for many of the characters and creating meaningless plot twists that not only destroys what made Oshi No Ko so great, but also literally setting the fanbase on fire. You guys already know what moment I'm alluding to, but we'll get to all that later, trust me. But first and foremost, let's talk about the movie. After Japan finds out the truth behind Aqua and Ruby's parents, Aqua uses that as an opportunity to greenlight a movie based on the life of Ai up until her death and showing how awful their father is. And during the production, we get a whole bunch of returning characters. Gotanda is directing it, Abiko and the other one are helping to write the script, and almost the entirety of the Tokyo Blade cast comes back to play roles in this movie. And at first, this seems awesome. It's like getting the everyone is here moment of Oshi No Ko. But all these returning characters don't really do anything. One of the coolest parts about Tokyo Blade was seeing all these different actors interact and seeing their acting styles clash with one another. But here, all they do is film their scenes, say a couple things regarding the movie, and just dip, making all the returns feel pretty pointless. Also, Peon's not here. How could you not include him? And as you slowly read through the arc, you notice that in terms of plot, nothing happens, or at least nothing of importance for dozens of chapters. Before, Akasaka was able to give interesting narratives regarding the production of all the entertainment Oshi No Ko covers. The disagreements between Obiko and the screenwriter for Tokyo Blade, the unselling truths behind reality dating TV shows. Hell, even Mainstay had something to say about the death of TV. But in the movie arc, everything feels so mundane. Most chapters just feel like they shoot scene for movie. Scene gets done. And that's it, that's all we get. Sometimes they would throw out an interesting plot twist of, oh, apparently Hikaru is the one funding the movie in the first place, and one of the original Bikamochi members that we never knew of and was never foreshadowed of was working with Hikaru this entire time. Those are crazy developments that make no sense. Are we gonna get some backstory as to how this happened? No, we don't, and it never gets brought up again. And instead we get Akane vs. Ruby, and who gets to play Ai in the movie. Is it the award-winning actress who's hailed as a prodigy, or Ai's daughter? Can you guess who won it? Or Kana starts to fake hate Ruby for a couple chapters because for some stupid reason, I don't know. And again, I hate to mention this, but the movie arc just feels so jarring compared to something like Tokyo Blade, which in scope is arguably as big as the movie arc, but flawlessly execute what this arc fails to do. The conflicts are engaging and make sense. The pacing is never slow, and everything flows super well. Even the most minor characters are treated fairly. It makes me question whether or not they're even written by the same person anymore. But the thing is that this isn't even the worst part. What feels the most egregious of all is how Akasaka treats our main characters. First up with Ruby. No, wait, not now. But trust me, Ruby, I'll get to you eventually, don't worry. Aqua, for one, has lost almost everything that made him so likable in the first place. All of the inner monologues on him taking in his surroundings, questioning who he is, and the selfless acts are gone. Now replaced with someone so incredibly monotone and has random bursts of an evil persona coming out, talking about descending to hell and being quote-unquote smarter than everyone else. Which comes off as incredibly corny and nothing like the Aqua we knew from before. You might say that this is on purpose. Aqua is obviously not in the right state of mind, and it's a cry for help. And you're right, Aqua desperately needs therapy, but it's the fact that it comes out of nowhere. A big part of what makes Aqua a shell of his former self is how we never see what's going on throughout his mind. His connection to the reader is entirely cut off, making him feel less interesting and having all of his actions feel so out of place. Like there's a moment in chapter 117 where he and Kana were talking and she gets all flustered and leaves the room because he called her special, and after she leaves, he has a moment where he does an evil laugh and calls her easy to manipulate? Dude, what was the point of that? Like, legitimately, there is nothing that happens after that justify his actions. It's just Aqua being a fucking douche. And speaking of Kana, her character arcs are just brushed aside for the most part. All that inner turmoil between being an idol and establishing yourself as an actor is just skipped over for the most part. This same chapter with Aqua going edgy mode begins with Kana tweeting out, "Hey, I'm quitting Bikamochi lol." And that's all we get of it. She's been an idol for so long, and you would think that this dilemma would bring a lot more doubt. Or Kana realizes that she has a ton of fans that are going to miss her. But no, I guess one tweet was enough to close out that 70 chapter arc, apparently. And all the interesting things that can be done with her character is gone just so she can be used as a plot device for Ruby. Which, speaking of, no, not yet. Almost. But not yet. And then we have Akane, who's pretty much useless for the most part. The absolute most she gets in this 40 chapter arc is her just saying, "I'll stop you, Aqua, from going down this dark path," and then proceeding to do nothing towards stopping Aqua at all. For such interesting characters that are slowly reaching their conclusions, this arc does nothing in terms of setting up where they're gonna be at by the end of the story. And with the plot itself also feeling stagnant, it feels like nothing of significance happens from chapter 110 all the way to chapter 141. Well, except for what happens in chapter 123. Why? What? Throughout the entire story, all we knew about Ruby's past life was that she was bedridden and eventually died. And even though this was already pretty sad, it was weird that not much was said about her parents, especially since when she died, no one was there to see her go except for Goro. And it's strange, did something happen to her parents? Are they already dead, maybe from the same illness that she had? Well, no, because as we eventually find out, Serena's parents just abandoned her. With how depressed they were after finding out their daughter was going to die from a deadly illness, instead of being with her until her final moments, her parents just opt to slowly forget about her so the pain won't be as bad. And by coincidence, Ruby eventually finds out that her past mom is actually doing great. With an entirely new family, it seems like she completely forgot about the daughter she abandoned. This is definitely one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire series. Watching Ruby witness her past mom easily move on for her, and seeing everything else she's dealing with right now makes her reach a breaking point, in which Aqua finds her crying in her room and tries to comfort her. Ruby doesn't want to hear it from him since they're still not on speaking terms, so instead, Aqua tries to comfort her as Goro, in which they both finally find out about each other's past identities. Aqua finally lets go of his edgy attitude and tells Ruby to no longer live for the sake of getting revenge, and most of all, telling her to not live like not live in all these lies and live the way she wants to and become an idol that her past self would be proud of, which finally puts an end to Dark Ruby and strengthens the bond between the Hoshino twins. Chapters 122 and 123 are some of the best feel-good chapters within the entire story, and finally brings back some much needed heart that's been absent for so long. Chapters that remind me how good it felt to see Kana being noticed after years of people turning her back on her, or Memcho realizing that her lifelong dream isn't dead. This was the Oshi No Ko I fell in love with. The one that shows glimmers of light in between all the dark. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, no. 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 No, no, there's no fucking way we're doing this right now. Ruby! What the fuck are you talking about? This panel ruins everything that came before it, because all of a sudden that beautiful and heartfelt moment between them connecting as a family is supposed to be interpreted in another way. If the chapter ended 2 pages before, it would have been perfect, but no, instead we got this random blurb from Ruby, and the entire fanbase overlooks what happened before and can only focus on what happened at the end. There's been a running meme for a while about Aqua and Ruby eventually getting together because Ruby liked Goro in their past lives, and it was never supposed to be taken seriously. I thought it was like a Sanji x Zoro thing where it's fun to joke about, and that's the exact same way I was treating this, as a joke. I have a friend who was decently into Oshi No Ko who actually sent me the leak of this chapter before it came out, and he said something along the lines of, "Bro, did you see this?" And no joke, I laughed out loud for a second, and I told him not to believe everything he sees on Twitter, only for me to then read the chapter and my heart absolutely sunk. This moment was a big turning point for a lot of fans, and even I questioned what kind of direction Akasaka was taking with the series. But I trusted this man before, and there was no reason for me not to trust him again. There's always been a boundary that was set very early on in the series, and I refuse to believe that's gonna be crossed now. Right? Right? This is it. The chapter that fully broke every Oshi No Ko fan. Ever since the events of 124, things weren't that bad, to be honest. There were even some chapters that I liked, and the whole Ruby thing was more so just reduced to a running gag. A gag that was never funny and disgusted me, but a gag. That's what I thought it was. And then came chapter 143. Aqua and Ruby have to prepare to have a kissing scene because they're playing the roles of their parents, which is so incredibly weird. Aqua even states that he doesn't want to do it because it's his fucking sister. But Abiko and the other one insist that he has to do it? What? These are fully grown adults telling twin siblings that are also minors to kiss, and they seem so excited about it. What? What is wrong with you guys? Why are you manipulating him to do something he so obviously doesn't want to do? Why are you acting like he's the weird one here? Whatever respect I had for these characters went completely out the window after this moment, and what makes it even harder to read is how into it Ruby is. At one point, I understood Ruby's past love for Goro, since that was the only person who was there for her, and she was 12. She had an innocent crush on a person that was older than her. It was cute. It's no longer cute. You lived with Aqua for 16 years knowing that is your brother, and all of a sudden, now that you find out he's somebody that you used to know, it automatically makes you think, yay, I can date my brother. No, ugh. Even joking about it seems weird. And Aqua blatantly tells her that he isn't comfortable with this, and that he isn't the doctor she knew from before. Aqua basically spills his guts out in front of her, saying how guilty he is from using others, and how he's doing things that he's constantly regretting. And I feel for him a bit. Even though I hate how edgy and cringy he's been acting for the past 40 chapters or so, it's obvious he's been hurting a lot mentally. The weight of taking revenge on his father and struggling to know who he really is has taken a toll on him, and I just wish he was able to let everything go and live like how he really wants to. And after hearing Aqua trauma dump all this onto her, Ruby doesn't care at all. Disregarding everything about Aqua feeling uncomfortable, spews some unnecessary bullshit about idols, and then does the thing that ruins everything. Remember when I praised Oshi No Ko for setting boundaries way earlier on in this video? Well, that's completely gone now. There's no going back from this. Like, what the fuck has this story become? What am I reading right now? This came out of nowhere. There's 20 chapters left and we're doing this. Where the fuck is Kamiki? Look what your children are doing right now. Or don't, because it's really weird. I hate it so much. Oshi No Ko's reputation was in the toilets after this. There was a ton of people on Twitter or TikTok reacting to this scene and saying, I always knew Oshi No Ko was weird, and I could never talk about this series in good faith again without people thinking it's the weirdest and most disgusting thing ever. And no, I swear it wasn't like that. At least at one point, it wasn't. God, there's nothing I could say to make this sound right. Many fans immediately dropped the series after this moment, and I couldn't blame them. After finishing this chapter, I felt like a complete fool for ever thinking Akasaka was too smart to put this in, and I wanted to put it down and never touch it again. But I didn't. And for some goddamn reason, I held on to hope. Hope that this awful chapter will lead to something, anything to justify what happened here had a purpose. Maybe the next chapter will start off with Aqua taken aback at what just happened and will feel terrible about it, causing him to realize he's fully grown past who he used to be and confront Ruby for her actions and tell her once and for all the person she loved is dead and needs to move on and only see him as her brother, which would retroactively help Aqua move on from his past as well. Theoretically, something like this could work. I've read Chainsaw Man before. I know you shouldn't judge something that happens until the next chapter comes out. And if I were to ever believe that someone could make this work, it'd be Akasaka. His work has wowed me before, and I know he could do it again. I'm not gonna give up now. There will be some sort of payoff. The next chapter is about Mel playing the role of Goro. What? The chapter after that is entirely comedic. Huh? Where's the payoff? Where's the repercussions that are supposed to come out of that kiss? Oh, there isn't any? The focus immediately shifts back to being about the movie, and in fact the kiss is never brought up in the series again? then what was the point of having it in the first place? This almost makes me as mad as the scene itself. The fact that it literally leads to nowhere makes me think that Akasaka just wanted to troll the entire fan base. This series up to this point has dealt with heavy topics that eventually get to some resolution. Why is this the one time there is no consequences to Ruby's actions? The entire build-up and execution has literally been a big waste of time, and the most surprising part of it all, I actually like the chapters after 143. We finally get substantial backstory for Hikaru and Ai's past. Kana asks Aqua to go on a date, and it's like the cutest thing ever. And Akane actually kinda helps Aqua with his deteriorating mental health. Chapters that I actually have fun reading, but makes me hate what happened before all the more because absolutely nothing came out of it. I now consider chapter 143 to be completely filler, and you cannot convince me otherwise. So after trudging through the entirety of the movie arc, we finally get the scene that we've been waiting for. Aqua comes face to face with his dad. How it gets set up is never explained, but here we are. What is Aqua gonna do after all this time of saying, I need to get my revenge, for over 150 chapters now? And it goes a lot more differently than you think. Instead of going evil murder dude on this guy, Aqua aims to affect him psychologically, showing him a video that I made for Aqua of the truth behind why she left Hikaru, and telling him that she knows Hikaru is good, but his experiences left him in the horrible state he is in now. And now Aqua says he made the entire movie in the first place to show his dad he never truly understood I, which now this movie acts as a timeless love letter from I to him. Look, I'm not a fan of bad guy learns lesson and turns good in the end, but I sort of like how it's handled here, especially since the glimpses we saw of Hikaru's past paints him as someone who was never truly evil, just another victim of the absolute cruelty that comes with being in the entertainment business. Is it great or even good? God, no. It still feels rushed and pretty anticlimactic, and the fact that Ruby wasn't in the room with them is a huge missed opportunity. But I wouldn't say this resolution was bad either. It shows that after everything he's been through in the story, Aqua decided that killing him wouldn't solve anything, and he decided to take a different approach that didn't end in bloodshed. But most of all, it displays one of Oshi No Ko's best messages in that nothing is black and white in this world, and doing more evil is not gonna help out in the long run. Are you fucking kidding me? At this point in time, it was all but confirmed that Oshi No Ko was coming to an end at a rapid pace. With the overarching plot complete, all that was left to focus on was wrapping our main characters' arcs and leaving us with a satisfying conclusion for the journey we've been on with them. Oh my god, Ruby just got stabbed. So even though Hikaru said everything was over, Nino, the old Bikomochi member that was apparently allied with Hikaru that never showed up in the story, decides to go ahead and try to kill off Ruby. It doesn't work because somehow Akane and Ichigo knew someone would try to murder Ruby, but it just felt so unnecessary. The plot twist with Nino in the first place felt forced as well. Taking a character that we literally knew nothing about and having her be some shock twist villain just felt like horrible writing and had no proper build-up whatsoever. And speaking of coming out of nowhere and having no proper build-up whatsoever, Hikaru was actually still an evil murder man, and somehow just knew that Nino was going to try to kill Ruby. What? Where did this come from? What happened to the unique take on Hikaru that falls within the line with the themes that the story presented so far, or taking time to find out why Hikaru went back on everything he said before? Because now all we get is Hikaru was always an evil guy and nothing could have ever changed his mind. This interaction right here makes what happened in chapter 152 to 155 a waste of time. And what precedes this makes the entire series a waste of time. Aqua pulls out a knife right to end Hikaru right then and there, and Hikaru starts to smooth talk him and says, "Aw, you wouldn't want your pure-hearted sister to be known as someone who's siblings with a murderer. Her reputation would absolutely plummet." Which, first off, Ruby is in no way pure of heart, but Aqua knows that he's right, and to cover it all up, Aqua decides to stab himself and then proceeds to push Hikaru and himself off the cliff, so when the police finds the bodies, they would think Hikaru was the one who killed them both. And as a reader, this felt like way too much information within the span of a single chapter, and you don't really get the chance to process it at all due to its rushed nature. So that's why when you first hear Hikaru's logic behind why Aqua shouldn't kill him, you start to think, yeah, it makes sense. And then you think about it for 2 fucking seconds and you're like, actually does not make sense. Because this situation is entirely based on assumptions. Hikaru assumed that the public would automatically hate Ruby if she was associated with the murderer, not taking into account he just had a feature-long film made on how awful of a person he is and someone who deserves to be punished. And if the public knew that Aqua, someone who has a very good reason for hating Hikaru, killed him, I don't think they'd be up in arms about it. Hell, just look how people in real life treated that one Luigi guy. Or in Aqua's case, who, by the way, has been planning this revenge for such a long time and thinks that he's such a smart guy, had a very dumbass plan, assuming A, somehow he'd know Hikaru would be at this cliffside for some reason. B, no one would be around on this pretty public cliffside to witness this ordeal happen. C, the knife he used to stab his body wouldn't be found by the police and having the fingerprints being traced back to himself. And D, Hikaru just standing there as he pushes him and himself off the cliff. Just look how slowly he pushes him. Like, Hikaru, dude, Aqua's not that strong. Just like, slightly move to the left. Come on. For a series I praised so hard for being realistic in these dark situations, the author completely insults the reader for expecting us to believe that this was the only way to stop Hikaru when there was other, better solutions that didn't have to lead to this. Especially since what's to come is what I believe to be the lowest part of the series. Yes, even lower than chapter 143. Because at least then, I was able to cope with the fact that maybe, eventually, it would lead to a good cause. But here, that tiny bit of hope that I struggled to hold on to was utterly gone after this. And what caused that was the death of Aqua Hoshino. Look, I'm not someone who's a big fan of a main character dying at the end of a movie or TV show. Something about going on an adventure with a main character all the way through, just for them to pass away, doesn't feel fulfilling to me. But in this case, if Aqua was going to die, it would take everything that Oshi No Ko was able to establish previously and tear it up into shreds, leaving us with all this buildup that led to nothing. Ever since his mother died in front of his eyes, Aqua thought his only purpose in life was to find out who offed his mom and get revenge all on his own, which is a very nihilistic way to look at his own life. And throughout the story, it blatantly tells the reader that this is a very toxic mindset for Aqua, and never expressing his true feelings and keeping it to himself was something bad that he had to overcome through the story. And slowly we see that come to fruition. He gets better, developing relationships with other people, caring about others' problems, and selflessly helping them, and even was able to find other reasons to live without the need for revenge, and it was amazing to see. Watching Aqua slowly fall in love with acting or talking casually with characters like Akane or Kana are some of my favorite moments because it shows how far Aqua has come from his toxic kill evil dad for revenge plot. And even though he eventually returns to that mindset, I believe that throughout everything he's experienced, he'll realize that this was never the right way to live and go back to being better. But if he ended up dying for the sake of revenge, it would feel like he's learned nothing, and everything's just been a big waste of time. Here, let me put it like this. Remember when Zuko from Avatar went through all that development in season 2? At the very end of it, he betrays Iroh and goes back to the Fire Nation? This is basically the exact thing Aqua also went through, but this time we don't get a conclusion to Zuko's redemption arc. He just remains evil for the rest of the story. And sure, this is more unpredictable, but all that does in the end is make the entirety of Aqua learning this in the first place pointless. Because this means that this panel went nowhere, Akane's promise to save Aqua went nowhere, Aqua never learned that it's okay to share his burden with others, and Aqua never learned to truly live, within his dying breath thinking his only purpose in his life was to protect his sister, which is such a grim message for people reading the series. In his last moments when he was looking back at his life, I was praying he would somehow not die. I didn't care if there was some kind of ass pull where Peon uses his observation hockey and realizes Aqua was in trouble and dives into the water and saves Aqua like the goat he is. Which, not gonna lie, sounds like a better ending, because his death just felt so stupid and wouldn't benefit anything or anyone. Here, let me take another example like Attack on Titan, a series where the main character also dies at the end. Oh, spoilers for Attack on Titan. And Avatar. And Vinland Saga. God, I spoiled a lot of anime in this video, huh? Even though I originally wasn't a fan of Eren dying, it makes sense for the story. The ongoing war between Paradise and Marley could have never been solved, so Eren had to take it upon himself to become the founding Titan and destroy everyone, which would make the opposing forces of Marley and Paradise come together to stop a greater evil, which would eventually end in peace. And even though the Attack on Titan ending is not that great, I admit how Isayama handled Eren's death made sense. Even though Eren had a lot to live for, there was literally nothing else he could have done to save the people he loved. So he had to make a sacrifice for the greater good, even if that means he's gonna miss all of his friends. And if Eren miraculously lived after the rumbling, there is no chance that he doesn't get executed or is locked behind bars of bars of bars in an indestructible cube, all the while being guarded by Mikasa for life. Which, you know, if Mikasa's always there, that doesn't seem that bad. But the point is, the plot gave Aqua so many other ways to deal with Hikaru, and yet he still felt the need to sacrifice his life instead. And since he went with this route, he never learned how much his existence mattered in terms of himself and other people. This was the dumbass path Akasaka took, and now we'll have to see how the characters will deal with his passing. Aqua meant a lot for everyone, and it's only necessary that we take as much time as possible letting these characters heal and what they will do now that Aqua is gone. What? What? Okay, so no, actually, after Aqua drowns, Akasaka decides to rush everything even more. We only get one chapter for the rest of the main cast to grieve, and it's a brutal read. Everyone's just crying and having so many regrets, and several characters break down on his passing. And then that's it! That's where the story ends! We don't get to see anything else from the rest of these characters. Sure, we kinda learn in the last chapter that they move on, which, good? But nothing else is told about how they moved on, or what they're up to now. Literally more time was given to Ai for people to grieve than the main fucking character in the series. The entire chapter could be summed up by saying, damn, sucks that Aqua is dead, but at least Ruby's cool. The end. No one here got a satisfying conclusion, or a conclusion for that matter. Here, let's go through them all. Akane hasn't really had her own character since Tokyo Blade. All of her actions center around Aqua, and even then, she had no part to play in bringing down Hikaru, despite the many times it's been alluded that she would stop Aqua or team up with him to bring down his father, which could have been so cool, but no, her own character arc was tossed away and feels like she's a waste of an interesting character. Kana has been treated like a punching bag for the better part of the story, and that never stopped. She never even got the chance to tell Aqua her feelings for him, and his own sister got to him before she did. She played no role in the overarching plot, which also feels like a waste, and her own development that was going on was tossed to the side. All of her contributions feel wasted now that Aqua is dead. And look, I'll just mention it here. Oshi No Ko was never a romance. It was never listed as a romance on my anime list, and Akasaka never promised there would be a romantic ending. So I shouldn't be hung up about not getting Aqua X Kana. But god damn it, that doesn't mean I don't deserve to be mad that it didn't happen. Akasaka made a beautiful love story that deserved to have some sort of payoff, or even have him end with Akane. I liked both of the ships. All of their interactions were a fun read, and I love how much they push each other forward and were there to help with each other's issues. And it's such a shame that all the moments we got with them was just entirely wasted in the end. Okay, and look, even though I don't like Ruby that much, it is so cruel that she just just kept losing everyone that was close to her, and as a final fuck you, her own brother left her as well. And despite not wanting to live like her mom did, always telling lies, the final pages of the story has her saying that she has to continue to lie to keep moving on. So she didn't even learn anything from all this either. Every character had their ending butchered, except for one. The only character I can confidently say had a conclusive character arc was Melt. A fucking minor character. This is the worst ending this series could have had. Hell, this is so bad that I would prefer to get the incest ending instead. Okay, no, I don't. That's a lie. Anything is better than that, and I'm glad that we never got that. But this comes as a very close second. Throughout this video, I have been keeping a graph of how much I enjoyed every arc out of 10 from beginning to the end. And this is how it looks in the first half. And this is how it looks by the end. And the only thing I have to say is how. How did this happen? How is this possible? For a series I held in such a high regard, how did it fall so badly? And that's when we have to look beyond the series and take a look at what was happening behind the scenes when Akasaka was first writing it. Unfortunately, getting a bad ending in any type of manga isn't that uncommon. And besides the fact that it's really hard to write a good ending, almost always you'll come to find out an external reason as to why your favorite series ended the way it did. So obviously, Oshi No Ko would be no different. Having a very rushed ending and all, it's obvious that something had to have happened behind the scenes, which in of itself is kinda poetic for how much the series shed light on the cruelty of entertainment businesses just for the same thing to happen here. Like, money-wise. The evil corporations don't care about how good a series is. If it doesn't make money, it's doomed. And as you can see here, near the end of its run, Oshi No Ko was one of the best-selling mangas of 2023 and 2024. Well, then obviously it came down to his health problems then. God, being a mangaka is so difficult. Writing and drawing for hours on end. It's no wonder Akasaka would be drained by now. Especially since this is his second manga he's drawn. Wait, that's not it either? He never actually drew Oshi No Ko? It was manga while he wrote the entire story? Oh, and he's also releasing a brand new manga in April after only finishing Oshi No Ko 4 months prior? Wait, what the fuck happened then? Compared to a ton of other manga, Oshi No Ko had a pretty okay serialization, so what could have possibly resulted in this downfall? And well, the main theory that fans typically suggest isn't some kind of tragedy or unforeseen circumstance, and instead people think Akasaka got bored. In the midst of writing this series, he grew tired of it and wanted to move on. Hence why this series had such a rushed ending when it could have easily gone on for another year or two, and why he was so quick to move on to something different after Oshi No Ko ended. And at first, it seemed like an immediate cope mechanism to justify getting such a shitty ending. You often see mangakas talk about how much their own series means to them. Hell, Abiko is the best example of that. But the main reason why the fans think this is the case is because of something very peculiar that happened during Oshi No Ko's period of serialization. But before we talk about that, we must talk about the anime that first put Akasaka on everyone's radar. Love is War is a rom-com about two high schoolers trying to make each other confess their love. The series ran for 6 years and has garnered a huge fan base, receiving an anime and live adaptation and selling more than 22 million volumes worldwide. However, according to the fans online, when the series entered its final years of serialization, the quality of the manga appeared to go down with it, leaving the series with a less than satisfying last arc. And maybe this just means Akasaka is bad at writing endings, but there's a part that often goes overlooked when people talk about Love is War's ending, and that is the timeline. The final chapter of Love is War came out on November 2nd, 2022, and on that same day, Chapter 99 of Oshi No Ko came out. Akasaka was creating both series at the same time. Given that Oshi No Ko was doing very well, even compared to Love is War, I'd imagine his passion for making Love is War slowly dwindled the more he wrote Oshi No Ko, thus decreasing the quality of the series. But it's strange that he would create even more work for himself when he didn't need to. Why did he feel the need to create a whole separate series just when his other manga was reaching its final climax? Unless writing Love is War for years on end was getting tiresome, and he wanted to move on to something fresh. But obviously, after making this mistake once, he could never do the same type of thing again. Putting that much pressure on yourself is very unhealthy, considering how overworked mangakas already are. Love Agency is a rom-com where a teenage girl receives advice on how to talk to boys. Okay, whatever, why did you have to mention that? Oshi No Ko and Love Agency were both written by Akasaka at the same time. Excuse me for a second, I'm just gonna go, So he never actually learned from his mistakes from last time and decided to create a whole other series in the midst of Oshi No Ko. And not like at the very end of it, no. The first chapter of Love Agency came out on May 5th, 2023, a couple of days before chapter 117 came out, which around that time he was writing the movie arc and when the decline in quality really started to show. And I've read a little bit of Love Agency and it's boring. It has some cute and funny moments with a unique concept that only a writer like Akasaka could come up with, but it's missing some flair that made his other two series more engaging to read. And with all due respect, it was an awful idea to create a whole other manga while you're in the middle of making the most important arc of your current series. Again. However, unlike last time, Akasaka didn't get as lucky as when he did this again. Because despite his credentials, Love Agency never went on to become a huge hit. In fact, the series did so poorly that it ended up getting axed. And I believe this is what might have pushed Akasaka to his limit. The failure of Love Agency was unlike anything he experienced before, and people kept telling him that he should only focus on Oshi No Ko, and this made him furious. He had no more passion to write for Oshi No Ko, and in fact couldn't stand how popular it's become. He wanted Oshi No Ko to die alongside Love Agency. And how exactly did he do that? Let's go back to that timeline again. On June 13th, 2024, Love Agency got axed. And 1 week later, Chapter 143 of Oshi No Ko came out. That's right, this is all your fault. You didn't read Love Agency. You are the reason why Akasaka got so mad. You are the reason why he got this kiss. You are responsible for Oshi No Ko's downfall. Now, okay, I'm just kidding. 143 actually came out a couple months prior, but damn it, it would have been a good plot twist, huh? If it wasn't already obvious, I'm not trying to put down Akasaka at all here. Despite everything I've said, he's still an incredible author for being able to put out a series as heartwarming as it is hilarious with Love is War, a realistic look at the entertainment industry with Oshi No Ko, and whatever Love Agency was at a constant pace. And I don't want to draw conclusions and say Akasaka got lazy is 100% fact, like other people tend to say. Seriously, I've seen that term thrown around so many times that I genuinely thought that Akasaka said it himself, and I was surprised to find out that he didn't when I asked the question on Reddit. But having said that, there is a very noticeable pattern here that's happened 2 times already and has now tarnished his best work's legacy because of it. In an interview after the conclusion of Oshi No Ko, Akasaka said he ended the series how he intended to back when the first chapter came out. And I don't know if he said that with a gun to his head so his fans wouldn't get more pissed off, but if it is, good for him. I'm glad he was able to finish this 4-year-long project with the original ending he had in mind. This is his series, and he deserves all the credit for bringing it to life in the first place. But goddammit, as a fan, I can't help but feel absolutely betrayed from this ending. Oshi No Ko is a series that meant a lot to me. I won't go as far as to say it changed my life or something, but I was heavily invested in the world Akasaka created. It only took me 3 episodes before deciding that I needed more, and then went on to binge the manga and caught up within 3 days, and it was even better than I could have possibly imagined. The Tokyo Blade arc still stands as one of my favorite arcs in any series I've watched or read. I found myself relating and being inspired by Kana, and watching Aqua slowly become more human made for one of the most interesting developments I've seen a main character go through. And when I was rereading it for this video, I found myself experiencing the same emotional highs as I did the first time. I tried to recommend this series to anyone I could because I believe they deserve to experience the same greatness as I did. And when the series ultimately went downhill, I still stood by it. I had confidence that it wouldn't last forever and it would turn into something good. And I kept patiently waiting for that moment, but it never came. Seeing that final page left me with nothing but emptiness. And not the good kind when you finish a TV show or a video game and are sad about it being done, but the kind of emptiness that makes you think, what was the point? What was the point of connecting with all these characters and following in their footsteps just for them to suffer by the end? What was the point of watching Aqua never truly living for his own free will and learning no one wins in revenge? A lesson so easy that even fucking Sonic 3 was able to say, but not the manga entirely focused on why Aqua's revenge plan was bad. For a series that showed the glimmers of hope of the entertainment industry that can be found through everything evil, this ending was not indicative of that. The final message of the series is just, yeah, the entertainment world sucks and there's nothing you can do about it. This isn't just a personal experience though. You see the majority of fans talk about their disappointment of the ending and how a series they cared so deeply for was thrown by the wayside, and instead the legacy of Oshi No Ko will be known for its dog shit ending, or still one, or whatever, I don't care. And if someone somehow came up to me and asked if they should get into Oshi No Ko, my honest to god answer would be no, because even though a lot of stuff is good, with the ending we currently have, I'd say it's not worth getting invested in. So I was able to answer all 3 questions that I proposed at the start of the video. However, there was one more question that I didn't mention because frankly, I had no clue on how to answer it. And that was the how. How is this possible? Frankly, that last question baffled me so much that I just left it out of the video entirely because I had no clue on how I was supposed to answer that. Until I experienced something similar myself. In November of 2024, the idea for this video first popped into my brain, and I can't tell you how much I wanted to make it at first. At the time, I was still in the middle of making an entirely different video on a different topic, but to be honest, it barely compared to how excited I was to make this one. And the more I thought about it, the more ideas came to my head. Jokes, suspenseful moments, thumbnails. It was all so exciting for me, and I couldn't wait to make it. And by December, when I finally finished my current video, I got to work right away to make this one, and the excitement I felt before only burned harder. And so I finally got to work. I reread the series and started to make a script, and at first it was amazing. A fresh, clean slate on a topic I never dealt with before. But slowly, as the days went on and the script got longer, something strange started to happen. The passion I felt for making this video slowly started to dwindle. I don't know if it was the amount of time I was putting into it, or how I was occupied with other things in my life, but I could feel myself being less and less excited to work on this video. Eventually, I did finish a script, but it came out to be over 30 pages, and even though my upload schedule is pretty ass to begin with, as a one-man team, I knew that this was going to be a lot to deal with. Despite that, I still trekked on, recording my voiceover and real-life segments, but for some reason, I couldn't help but feel that all those amazing points and jokes I had in my head didn't quite come out as amazing as I thought it was. And then the insecurities kicked in. My channel for the most part is entirely Pokemon based, and now I'm talking about an anime? What am I thinking? Do I want my channel to die? Who's gonna watch this shit? These thoughts kept coming day after day, and my original due date for the video kept getting pushed back more and more, to the point where I lost every bit of confidence I originally had, and I just wanted to move on. At this point, it feels like this story is fairly similar to another one I read not too long ago, where an author seemed so passionate and driven to write a series, seemingly gave up halfway and wanted to move on to something else. And even though it seemed so illogical before, I now understood where he was coming from. Putting so much of your time or your sanity for a product is so daunting and understandably a hard thing to do, especially if that product is an ongoing manga that's taken up the entirety of your life for 4 years straight. And I can't blame him anymore if the claims that he did get burned out are true. So then, why exactly are you watching this video after everything I just said for the past 2 minutes? And well, it might sound stupid, but I did it for you, or more specifically, the fans of Oshi No Ko. Fans who spent years of their life invested in Oshi No Ko, excitedly waiting week to week for the official release, discussing with others online about their favorite characters, sharing fan art or cosplay, understanding when there's breaks. These were the people who deserved to get a satisfying conclusion to the series we loved so deeply. And when we didn't get that conclusion, the fans took initiative to make their own ending, which is like really good, by the way. I won't spoil anything, but it is so much more fulfilling than the one we've already got. And those were the same people who pushed me to finish this behemoth of a video. And it took a while. No, while's not a good word. More like a really fucking long time. But eventually, I got it done. And I couldn't be happier about it. This series held a special place in my heart, and I want to share my love, disappointment, hatred, and everything else that came with it, because while Akasaka left the series to die in the water alongside Aqua, the fandom will forever shine, just like I, Hoshino, did. I still don't understand that one guy that burned his volume of Oshi No Ko, like, Akasaka's not going to see that. You're just wasting your own money. And some really good paper. Hey, wow, look at that! You made it to the end of the video. Good on you. If you like these really long critiques on animes or video games, then consider subscribing, because I love making this kind of stuff, and I really hope that you like watching it, I guess. And I promise that next time I make a video, it will not come out in 4 months. God damn it, I already made that joke in the past, didn't I?